of fighting, but we cannot let this movement go nationwide. It is already starting to happen all over us, here even in Texas. The big question is how? How do we fight back? Well, there is no better person to talk to than a teacher on the ground in California facing all of this head on. With me now is William Reusch. He is the co-moderator at the Heterodox Academy K-12 education community, which, until I looked into it, William, just the name went, I think I'm going to have a brain aneurysm. I think your school is where I would want to send my kids to school. Tell me what you do.
Yeah, thank you for bringing me on. This is a really important topic, and I've been kind of yelling about it for years and just getting nothing. It's like those dreams where you keep yelling and then just no one hears you. So Heterodox Academy is a nonpartisan nonprofit that I'm working with, and then I am actually a full-time K-12 high school teacher at a religious private school in Los Angeles. I was teaching public school for 7 years, and then I had to leave. I have my issues with the education system. So I'm actually at a private school now, but I'm also working with Heterodox Academy.
Okay, so you are friends with the Weinsteins, Jonathan Haidt, James Lindsay, Helen Pluckrose, all new friends of mine. Are you cut from the same cloth? Do you come from a more traditional liberal background? Yeah,
absolutely. And okay. I think that's why I'm fighting against this. This is not liberal. This is illiberal.
Yes, it is. How come the liberals are all on board with it then? The ones who've called themselves liberal, but I don't think they even know what liberal means.
That's a great question. I think that it's a mix. I think that it's largely ignorance. You know, I mean, there's people who just don't understand that when you change the definitions of words, then it's going to change the way that you view kind of everything going on. So during the summer, for example, during the riots and the protests and things like that for George Floyd, there was a very big movement to elevate Black voices. And what I noticed is all of the teachers that I was talking to and following, they were all elevating just progressive Black voices. And I said, why are you not bringing in other, Thomas Sowell or John McWhorter or Glenn Lowry or, Ayan Hirsi Ali? There's so many. And what I got from several teachers is, well, are they saying anything different? It's like, well, yeah, John McWhorter says that anti-racism could be more dangerous than racism. So I'd say that's different. Yeah, that's the opposite.
And I just saw a copy of Booker T. Washington's book. In the introduction, a few years ago, it said, we're not sure if any of this is true. It is now labeled a work of fiction. Booker T. Washington. What's happening to us?
I think that there's the PR, and you know this well, Glenn, like the PR of the conservatives is not great. And it's the cliche of, conservatives are, mean and hard-hearted and the liberals are kind of ignorant or dumb or something like that. And a lot of teachers, you get into school teaching because you want to help kids. I mean, it's a certain personality that gets into education. And
sure,
it's lack of a better term, it's you get a little bit gullible. You're soft-hearted. And one of the things that James Lindsay has said that just really resonated with me is that's what's really pernicious and just horrible about critical race theory is it takes these very soft-hearted individuals, and I've watched this happen over and over again, and it turns them into authoritarian kind of individuals. It changes them.
Okay, but I have to tell you, I'm not the sharpest knife in the drawer by any. I mean, I'm practically a spoon. But as I look at critical race theory and I read it and just take the next step on thinking things through, it's mainly nonsense, and the critical thinking on it completely turns you off quickly. So tell me how these really intelligent teachers can be teaching what I believe is more nonsensical than Dr. Seuss. and not see it.
They're not reading it. So they don't, I've read a lot of critical race theorists. I've talked to a lot of them on my podcast and things like that. And a lot of it is kind of like postmodernism theory is kind of where it's rooted in, Foucault and Derrida and all of them. And that is a way to think. It's kind of an interesting way to think. If you want to go into, postmodernist or even critical race theory, you want to read through it and you go, this is a way to approach thinking. I'm an open-minded guy. I'm okay with reading anything. Cool, let's read that. But it can't be mainlined into everything. It was never meant to be the way. And so what's happening is people aren't reading it. The teachers aren't reading it. Educators aren't reading it. They're taking it on face value. And the face value, it's terrible ideas. You're right about that. But it's very well marketed. And it's very well done in the way that it's done. So if you are an anti-fascist, then you're the good guy. If you're an anti-racist, then you're the good guy. Yeah. And people aren't going beyond that first layer of the onion.
I have to tell you, I'm from what some people would say is a weirdo faith. I'm a Mormon, and being a Mormon in Texas and trying to get your kids into school, into a private Christian school, is very difficult. We've been rejected by some of the best, but one of them, actually called me in and talked to me about it, and I said, look, I've donated to your church. I've actively supported your church. I'm not asking you to change your theology classes. I want my kids to hear the difference. I will encourage them to push back and argue, but not to try to change anybody's mind. I want them to hear about all different faiths because they have to make the decision. Nobody seems to want to do that anymore. Nobody seems to want to encourage the speech that is the only speech that needs to be defended is the speech nobody wants to hear. We should hear those things, or we just get smaller and smaller and smaller until we're nothing.
Yeah, there's just no viewpoint diversity, so if you're gonna make Robin DiAngelo's White Fragility mandatory reading, it is in a lot of schools, then just also give Helen Pluckrose, Cynical Theories, or Douglas Murray's Madness of Crowds, just so they have another perspective. And if, one thing that teachers always talk about is we're supposed to model being a lifelong learner. But as soon as you give any pushback, I have had 3 of the last 4 NEA National Teachers of the Year on my podcast. 2 of them won't talk to me anymore. I asked them very simple pushback questions, very simple, and they just clammed up and just, nope, I don't know what you're talking about. They don't want to touch it. So if it's the NEA, the biggest union, the teachers union, it's the colleges of education, and it's California and New York. It's just, there's no speed bumps.
Tell me how this is affecting our children. What does this mean? It can be all different ways, because one thing is I teach high school, so teenagers, one thing about them is they have excellent BS detectors. So, and they're rebellious. So they are gonna push back. And my concern is with the pushback too, because I, like you even said about the school, I have no problem. I teach elements of Howard Zinn, but Howard Zinn is not the only textbook that I teach. So I think that, people are going to push back, which is going to be good, but then they could be punished for that. We don't really know how this is going to play out. We really don't. But people are not going to just buy this hook, line, and sinker. They're not. Just how it plays out, we don't know yet. So you're pushing, and you seem to be as worried about it as I am, and yet you don't know how it's going to pan out. How do you think it's going to pan out? I mean, what happens to us if this continues?
I think I think education is, I'm a teacher, so I think that the answer to everything is education. So I think education gets out, which is why on your show, which is why I'm all over social media, which is why I'm collecting people, teachers listening or educational advocates listening. Please check out Heterodox Academy. It's not a conservative thing. It's not a progressive thing. It's just the idea of viewpoint diversity is so important. And I think that we're gonna kind of rediscover American principles. Like our founding fathers didn't agree. They didn't get along, but they realized that they have a bigger a bigger agenda, and they got to work together. They got to compromise. I think it's going to be a colossal waste of time, and we're going to get back to original American principles. I guess that would be my best guess.
I hope you're right. I will tell you, the last school to reject my children because we were into the right faith, which was so bizarre, I went to the science teacher and I said, do you teach evolution? Do you teach the Big Bang? If they would have said no, I would have dismissed the school. But they said, oh yes. I asked how they taught it. They taught it as a serious theory. Great. We must teach our children things that we may not agree with or we may think is not the way it works, but we have to teach all of it. Otherwise, they're not equipped to go out in the world.
Teach kids how to think, not what to think. And this is not what this is. And on top of that, I just have to say, what we should be focusing on is skills. Like teaching kids skills. You look at the literacy rates of third graders and you can make a really good estimate of what the prison population is going to be like. So if you really care about social justice, let's get kids, especially in marginalized communities, let's get them skills. Let's hold a high bar, high expectations for these kids, give them structure, give them hard skills, and then that is what will lift them out of poverty. Not lowering the bar. Saying no matter what, you are fine no matter what. It's the opposite of what will actually help them, and that's a perverse, unintended consequence of a lot of this stuff.
William, thank you so much. I can't wait to listen to your podcast. I've never listened, but I have a feeling I'm going to be a dedicated listener to your podcast. Thank you very much. God bless.
Thank you so much for bringing me on. It's important. Thank you, sir.
You bet. Next.